I'm standing outside my brother's wedding venue, about to destroy his marriage with a DNA test in one hand and our father's will in the other. Right after my brother announced his engagement, I discovered my fiance has been draining our wedding fund. Not for shopping, not for debt, for legal fees. The only person I know who needed a lawyer is my brother. He's been fighting a custody battle with his ex, posting about being a devoted father, accepting support from everyone including me. But then I saw $63,000 missing from our joint account. Every payment to the same law firm representing my brother. When I confronted my fiancée Sarah about the withdrawals, she said it was for wedding preparations. But I found the receipts. The timeline matched perfectly. Every payment coincided with my brother's court dates. Then I dug deeper. Hotel receipts when she was supposedly at conferences. Venmo payments to him labeled consultation fees. Deleted texts about how nobody can know until after the wedding. They'd been together for 3 years. 3 years of family dinners. 3 years of me being the fool who introduced them. So I decided to wait. 2 months of playing dumb while gathering evidence, making her coffee every morning, helping my brother with wedding planning, even gave a toast at his bachelor party about finding true love. Meanwhile, I hired a private investigator who uncovered something shocking. The child my brother was fighting for? Not his ex's. It's Sarah's. From before we met. She gave the baby up for adoption. My brother's ex adopted it, and now they're trying to get the child back together. My plan was surgical. Wait until the wedding ceremony. During the speak now or forever hold your peace moment, I'd reveal everything. Play the evidence on the venue screens. Maximum destruction. Then Mom called to prepare me. She knew. Had known for 2 years. Said Sarah and my brother were meant to be, and I should step aside gracefully. My own mother helped them hide it, covered for them, even helped pay for the lawyer. Then the universe twisted the knife. My father, who'd been estranged for years, died suddenly. Left everything to his sons, but only the biological ones. That's when I discovered my brother isn't Dad's biological son. Mom had an affair 40 years ago. My brother doesn't know. The will requires DNA tests for inheritance. $4 million that my brother thinks he's getting. But here's the worst part. I took a DNA test to be thorough. The results came back. The child my brother and Sarah are fighting for? The DNA shows I'm actually the biological father. Sarah and I had hooked up once years ago before we officially dated. She never told me she got pregnant. Now I'm standing outside the church. Everyone's inside. The ceremony's about to start. In one hand, the DNA results proving my brother gets nothing from Dad's will and that his child is actually mine. In the other hand, Dad's will that would destroy him financially. The music starts. Sarah's walking down the aisle in the dress I thought she'd wear for our wedding. My brother's smiling at the altar, about to marry the mother of my child with my money. My phone buzzes. It's the private investigator with one final piece of information that changes everything. I pull my phone from my pocket, and my hands shake so bad I almost drop it. The text from the private investigator fills the screen, and I read it once, then twice, then 3 times because my brain can't process what it says. Sarah was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer 3 years ago, same week she got pregnant with my child. Doctors gave her 2 years maximum. She's been in experimental treatment this whole time, funded by my brother's family money. The church music swells behind me, and suddenly everything I thought I understood shifts sideways. All those hotel receipts I found, all those weird payments, the deleted texts about keeping secrets. She was dying. Is dying. Has been dying this whole time while I planned my revenge like some kind of movie villain. My carefully organized evidence feels heavy in my hands now. The DNA results and Dad's will suddenly complicated in ways that make my chest tight. Sarah chose to spend her last months or weeks or days with my brother instead of telling me the truth, and I don't know if that makes the betrayal worse or if it adds some twisted layer of sense to the whole mess. The church doors are right in front of me, and I can hear the organ playing that traditional wedding march through the thick wood. Everyone's inside waiting for the ceremony to start. My brother's probably standing at the altar right now checking his watch, wondering where his bride went. Mom's sitting in the front row pretending she didn't help orchestrate this whole disaster. And Sarah's walking down the aisle in a dress I once imagined her wearing for me. Except now I know she picked it knowing she'd be dead before our first anniversary. I stand frozen outside those church doors with my hand on the handle, unable to push it open. My original plan was so clear, so surgical. Wait for the officiant to ask if anyone objects, then stand up and destroy them both in front of everyone who matters. Play the evidence on the venue screens, show the bank statements, the hotel receipts, the paternity test results. Maximum destruction, maximum humiliation, maximum revenge. But now there's this text message burning a hole in my brain, and suddenly my rage feels hollow. Sarah's dying. That doesn't excuse what she did, doesn't make the betrayal hurt less, doesn't change the fact that she stole $63,000 from our joint account and lied to my face every single day for 3 years. But it adds context I wasn't ready for. She knew she was dying when she got pregnant with my kid. She gave the baby up for adoption because she thought she wouldn't be around to raise him. Then she fell in love with my brother, or maybe she was using him to get close to the child through his ex who adopted the baby, or maybe both things are true at the same time. People are complicated when they're desperate and scared and running out of time. I finally push open the church door and slip inside as quietly as I can. The place is packed with family and friends, everyone dressed up and smiling like this is a normal, happy occasion. I slide into the back row and keep my head down, clutching the documents against my chest. Sarah's halfway down the aisle now, and I can see her clearly for the first time since I found out about the affair. She looks thin, really thin. The kind of thin where her collarbone sticks out sharp under her dress and her arms look like they belong to someone 20 years older. The makeup artist did a good job covering up how sick she is, but now that I know what to look for, I can see it everywhere. The way she walks is careful, like each step takes concentration. Her smile is bright, but there's something brittle about it. Something that suggests she's using every bit of energy she has left to get through this day. My brother stands at the altar watching her approach, and his face is full of pure joy, completely unaware that in about 10 minutes his entire world is going to explode into pieces he'll never be able to put back together. The officiant starts the ceremony, and I sit there in the back row with the DNA results and Dad's will in my lap. My original plan feels increasingly wrong, even though my anger hasn't gone anywhere. This isn't just about humiliating them anymore. Isn't just about making them feel the pain they caused me. There's a child involved. My child. A 3-year-old boy I've never met who's caught in the middle of this dysfunction. There's a dying woman who made terrible choices for reasons I'm only beginning to understand. There's my brother who doesn't know he's not Dad's biological son, who thinks he's about to inherit $4 million that will never be his, who's fighting for custody of a child that isn't even his. The clear moral lines I thought existed have blurred into complicated gray areas that make my head hurt. I could still do it. Could still stand up and reveal everything and watch their lives fall apart in real time. But sitting here listening to the officiant talk about love and commitment and building a future together, I'm not sure what that would accomplish besides making me feel powerful for about 5 minutes before the guilt set in. I think back to 2 months ago when I first discovered the missing $63,000 from our joint account. My rage felt so simple then, so pure and justified. I was the victim, they were the villains, and revenge would make everything right. I spent weeks gathering evidence with the private investigator, documenting every lie and every secret meeting. I made Sarah coffee every morning and kissed her goodbye like nothing was wrong. I helped my brother with wedding planning and gave a toast at his bachelor party about finding true love, all while knowing I was going to destroy him. It felt good to have a plan, to know exactly how this would play out. But now I see how many lives are about to explode from secrets and lies that go back decades. Mom's affair 40 years ago that resulted in my brother. Dad's will that requires DNA testing and cuts out non-biological children. Sarah's terminal diagnosis that she hid from everyone, including the man she's about to marry. My own biological son that I didn't know existed until a week ago. The revenge I planned would hurt my brother and Sarah, sure, but it would also devastate that little boy who's already been through enough chaos with the custody battle. It would expose Mom's decades-old affair to the entire family. It would air all our dysfunction in front of 200 wedding guests who just came here for cake and dancing. The officiant gets to the part where he asks if anyone objects to the marriage, and I feel every muscle in my body tense up. This is it. This is the moment I've been waiting for, planning for, building toward for 2 solid months. I can feel eyes drifting toward me, even though nobody knows I'm here. Like the universe itself is holding its breath, waiting to see what I'll do. My hand tightens on the envelope with the DNA results, and I realize I have maybe 10 seconds to decide what kind of person I'm going to be. The vengeful brother who destroys his family for justice? The bigger man who walks away and lets them have their happiness? Something in between that I haven't figured out yet? Sarah glances back over her shoulder, and for just a second our eyes meet across the church. She doesn't know I'm here. Her face is happy and hopeful, and so sick-looking under all that makeup that my anger wavers for just a moment. I stand up, and my voice cuts through the church before I fully decide what I'm doing. The words come out clear and loud and final. Sarah turns around and her face goes completely white when she sees me standing in the back row. My brother looks confused at first. Then recognition hits and his expression shifts to anger mixed with fear. The guests start murmuring and turning in their seats to see who's objecting. I walk down the aisle with the documents in my hand, and every step feels like I'm moving through water. This isn't how I planned it. I was supposed to wait for this exact moment, but then play the evidence on screens, make a dramatic speech, destroy them publicly and completely. Instead, I'm walking toward them with my heart pounding and no clear idea what I'm going to say or do next. The officiant looks completely lost. Probably never had anyone actually object at a wedding before. Sarah's eyes are locked on mine, and I can see her trying to figure out how much I know, how bad this is going to be. My brother takes a step toward me and opens his mouth to say something, but I hold up my hand to stop him. I don't play the evidence on screens or make the dramatic speech I planned for weeks. Instead, I walk straight up to Sarah and my brother and speak quietly enough that only they can hear me over the confused murmuring of the guests. I tell them I know about the cancer. I know about the baby. I know everything. Sarah's eyes fill with tears immediately, and her whole body seems to fold in on itself. My brother's confusion deepens into fear as he realizes this isn't just me being dramatic or trying to stop the wedding for some petty reason. This is something bigger and worse than he imagined. His hand reaches for Sarah's arm, but she's staring at me like I'm holding a gun instead of a folder full of documents. The officiant starts to say something about taking this outside, but I ignore him. The guests are getting louder now, people standing up to see what's happening. Mom somewhere in the front row probably having a heart attack. Sarah reaches for my arm, and her fingers are cold and thin against my skin. She whispers that I should please not do this here, not like this, but I pull away from her touch. I turn to address my brother directly and tell him we need to talk privately right now. There are things about our family he doesn't know, things that can't wait until after the ceremony. This wedding cannot happen today. My brother starts to argue, his face going red with anger and embarrassment, but I hand him the DNA test results before he can get words out. He takes the paper and stares at it like it's written in a foreign language. The lab results are clear and simple. The child he's been fighting for custody of, the child he thinks is his, the child Sarah told him was his. The DNA shows I'm the biological father. My brother reads the paper once, twice, 3 times. His hands start shaking. Sarah is crying harder now, mascara running down her face in black streaks. The guests are standing up and moving closer, trying to see what's happening. And then Mom stands up from her seat in the front row looking panicked because she knows exactly what else I'm about to reveal, knows that her 40-year-old secret is about to come out in the worst possible way. I turn back to face the church full of confused guests and raise my voice so everyone can hear me. The ceremony needs to stop right now because of urgent family business that can't wait. I look directly at my brother and Sarah standing frozen at the altar and tell them we need to talk in private immediately. My brother's still holding the DNA results with shaking hands, while Sarah's face has gone from white to gray, her whole body swaying like she might pass out any second. The guests start talking louder now, people standing up and craning their necks to see what's happening. Mom pushes her way out of the front row and starts walking toward us, but I hold up my hand to stop her. She needs to stay right where she is because I'll deal with her later after I handle this first. The officiant looks completely lost and asks if we should reschedule, but I ignore him and gesture for my brother and Sarah to follow me. My brother finally moves, stumbling down the altar steps while still staring at that paper, like it might change if he reads it enough times. Sarah follows behind him, her wedding dress rustling as she walks, and I can see her legs barely holding her up. We walk past rows of confused guests who are all whispering and pointing, past Mom who's trying to catch my eye, but I refuse to look at her. The venue has a private consultation room off to the side that wedding parties use for emergencies, and this definitely counts as one. I open the door and wait for them to go inside first, then close it behind us and lock it so nobody can interrupt what's about to happen. The room is small with just a couch, 2 chairs, and a mirror on the wall. Sarah sits down on the couch immediately like her legs gave out, and my brother stays standing near the door looking like he wants to run. I pull out all the documents I've been carrying and spread them on the coffee table in front of the couch. Bank statements showing every single withdrawal from our joint account over the past 3 years. Hotel receipts with dates and locations. Venmo payment screenshots with those stupid consultation fee labels. Text message printouts that I recovered from Sarah's cloud backup after she deleted them. I lay it all out methodically while my brother stares at the evidence and Sarah keeps her eyes on the floor. $63,000 stolen from the account we were supposed to use for our wedding. Every payment timed perfectly with my brother's court dates for that custody battle. 3 years of hotel stays when Sarah told me she was at conferences or visiting her sick aunt. I point to each piece of evidence and explain what it shows while my brother keeps shaking his head and saying, "This can't be real." But it is real, and I have the receipts to prove every single lie. Sarah sits there silent and shaking, her hands twisted together in her lap, mascara running down her face in black streaks that are staining her white dress. I'm way calmer than I expected to be right now. The rage that's been burning in my chest for 2 months has turned into something cold and clear, like ice instead of fire. I can see everything so clearly now without the anger clouding my vision. My brother finally looks up from the evidence and asks Sarah if this is true, if she really did all of this. His voice sounds broken and confused, like a kid who just found out Santa isn't real. Sarah doesn't answer at first, just sits there crying harder, and the silence stretches out until it feels like the room might explode from the pressure. Then she starts talking in this quiet voice that I can barely hear. She tells my brother she's sorry, that she never meant for any of this to happen the way it did. She says she fell in love with him after we started dating, and didn't know how to tell anyone without destroying everything. She admits the affair went on for 3 years, all those family dinners and holidays where they both smiled at me while lying to my face. She confirms she used my money to pay for his legal fees because she wanted to help him get custody of the baby. My brother asks what baby and Sarah looks at me like she's begging me not to say it. But I came here to burn everything down, so I tell him the truth. The child he's been fighting for isn't his ex's biological kid. It's Sarah's baby from before we officially started dating. Sarah admits it's true, that we hooked up once years ago before we were together and she got pregnant but never told me. She gave the baby up for adoption because she was scared and young and didn't know what else to do. My brother's face goes through about 10 different emotions in 5 seconds. He looks at Sarah like he's never seen her before, like she's a complete stranger wearing his fiance's face. I reach into my jacket and pull out the second set of DNA results, the ones that are going to destroy what's left of my brother's world. I tell him there's more he needs to know about our family, stuff that goes back way before any of this mess with Sarah. His hands are shaking so bad when he takes the document that he almost drops it. The paper shows clear as day that he's not Dad's biological son. The DNA test I ran doesn't match between him and Dad at all. My brother reads it once, then again, then a third time, like maybe the words will change if he stares at them long enough. He looks up at me with this expression of complete devastation in his eyes and asks what this means. I almost feel sorry for him in that moment because his whole identity is about to shatter into pieces. I explain that Dad wasn't his real father, that Mom had an affair 40 years ago before he was born. My brother asks if I'm sure about this, and I show him the lab report with both our DNA profiles compared to Dad's. Mine matches perfectly. His doesn't match at all. He stumbles backward until he hits one of the chairs and sits down hard, the DNA results falling from his hands onto the floor. My brother's voice comes out barely above a whisper when he asks if Mom knows about this. I tell him she's known his entire life that he wasn't Dad's biological son. It was her affair 40 years ago that resulted in his birth, and she never told anyone the truth. She let Dad raise him as his own son for 4 decades while keeping the secret buried. My brother puts his head in his hands and I can see his whole body shaking. His wedding day has turned into the complete destruction of everything he thought he knew about himself. Who his father is, who he thought he was. His entire sense of identity just got ripped away in the span of 5 minutes. Sarah reaches out to touch his shoulder, but he pulls away from her like her hand burned him. She starts to say something, but he tells her not to touch him right now, that he can't handle her trying to comfort him after everything she's done. The room feels suffocating with all the lies and betrayal hanging in the air between us. I'm not done yet, though, because there's still the matter of Dad's will and the inheritance. I pull out the legal documents and explain that Dad left everything to his biological sons only. $4 million split between his real children. The will specifically requires DNA testing to prove biological relationship before anyone gets a penny. My brother's face goes from shock to anger as he realizes what this means. He doesn't just lose his fiancée and his child and his father and his identity. He loses $4 million that he thought was coming to him. He loses everything in one day, every single thing that defined who he was. His face turns red and he stands up fast, asking if I planned this whole thing, if I knew about the will when I showed up today. I tell him I found out about Dad's death and the will requirements 2 weeks ago, right around the same time I discovered the truth about him not being Dad's biological son. The full scope of what he's losing seems to hit him all at once. His fiancée, who he stole from me. His child, who isn't actually his child at all. His father, who wasn't really his father. His inheritance that he has no legal claim to. His entire sense of who he is as a person. Everything gone in the time it takes to read a few pieces of paper. Sarah starts coughing and it sounds bad. Not like a normal cough, but something deeper and more serious. I look at her closely for the first time since we came into this room, and I can see how sick she really is now that I know what to look for. The way her skin looks almost transparent. The dark circles under her eyes that makeup can't fully hide. How thin she is under that wedding dress. My brother notices too and asks her what's wrong, if she's okay. Sarah tries to stop coughing, but it keeps going, her whole body shaking with each cough. Finally, she manages to get control and tells us through tears that she has stage 4 cancer. She's been in treatment for 3 years, the same 3 years she was having an affair with my brother. My brother stares at her like she just spoke a foreign language. He asks her to repeat what she said, and she admits it again, that she has terminal cancer and has been hiding it from everyone. The doctors gave her 2 years maximum when they diagnosed her, but experimental treatment has kept her alive longer than expected. My brother looks at her with this mixture of heartbreak and betrayal on his face. She hid this from him too, another massive secret on top of all the others. He asks why she didn't tell him, and his voice cracks on the question. Sarah wipes at her face with shaking hands and says she wanted him to love her as a healthy person, not as someone who was dying. She didn't want to be defined by her illness or have him stay with her out of pity. She wanted their relationship to be real and normal for as long as she could pretend everything was okay. Then she admits she used my money for his legal fees because she wanted to help him get custody of the baby before she died. She thought if she could help him get the child back, she'd be giving him something to hold on to after she was gone. Some kind of family to remember her by. The explanation doesn't excuse the betrayal at all, but it adds context I wasn't expecting. She was dying and desperate and making terrible choices because she was trying to create some kind of legacy before she ran out of time. My brother sits back down and puts his face in his hands again. I can see him trying to process that the woman he loves has been dying this whole time and never told him. That every moment they spent together was borrowed time she was stealing from death. I tell them both that I'm taking custody of my biological son since I'm the actual father and have the financial means to provide for him now. Sarah starts crying even harder and says she wanted the baby to have a family with both parents, which is why she was helping my brother fight for custody in the first place. She thought if they could get the child back together, he'd have a real home with two people who loved him before she died. She never planned to tell me the truth about being the father because she thought my brother would be a better parent. My brother just stares at the floor looking completely broken. His whole world has collapsed around him in the span of maybe 20 minutes. Everything he thought was true turned out to be lies built on top of more lies. I feel a tiny bit of satisfaction that my revenge worked exactly like I planned, but mostly I just feel tired and empty. There's a knock on the door, and then it opens even though I locked it. Mom must have gotten a spare key from the venue staff. She walks in demanding to know what's happening, why we're hiding in here while 200 guests wait in the church. I turn to face her with all the anger I've been holding back for the past 2 years since she knew about the affair. I tell her she has no right to be here after lying to me about Sarah and my brother, after helping them hide their relationship, and even paying for some of the legal fees herself. She tries to justify it by saying she was protecting the family, trying to keep everyone together and happy. I laugh at the irony of her talking about protecting the family, when she's the one who started this whole mess 40 years ago with her own affair. Mom's face goes pale as she realizes I know about that too. I turn back to face her and say that we need to talk about something else, something that happened 40 years ago when she got pregnant with my brother. The color drains from her face and she takes a step backward, her hand reaching for the wall to steady herself. My brother looks between us confused and asks what I'm talking about, why I'm bringing up stuff from before he was born. I pull out the second set of DNA results from my jacket pocket and hand them to him, watching as his hands shake while he reads the document showing he shares no biological markers with Dad. He reads it once, then again, then looks up at Mom with this expression like his whole world just shattered into pieces that can't be put back together. She opens her mouth, but nothing comes out at first. Just this strangled sound like she's choking on the words she's held inside for 4 decades. Finally, she admits it out loud, says yes, it's true. She had an affair in college and got pregnant and married Dad right after without telling him the baby wasn't his. My brother asks her who his real father is, his voice getting louder with each word, and she shakes her head saying it doesn't matter anymore because the man died in a car accident before she even knew she was pregnant. The air in the room feels thick and heavy, like we're all drowning in lies that have been stacked on top of each other for so long, they've become their own kind of truth. My brother sits back down and puts his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking, and I realize he's crying for the second time today. Mom tries to go to him, but I step between them and tell her she's done enough damage, that she needs to stay away from both of us right now. She starts saying she was trying to protect everyone, that she was young and scared and made choices she thought were right at the time. I cut her off and say the family was already destroyed the moment she decided to lie to Dad for 40 years. The moment she helped Sarah and my brother hide their affair from me. The moment she chose everyone else's feelings over the truth. She begs me to think about my brother's feelings, to consider what this information will do to him, and I actually laugh because the irony is too much. I point out that nobody thought about my feelings when they were all lying to me, when Sarah was draining our wedding fund, when my own mother was helping them cover their tracks. My brother lifts his head and tells Mom to leave, his voice completely flat and empty, like all the emotion has been drained out of him. She looks at him with tears running down her face and tries to say something else, but he just repeats it, tells her to get out, and finally she turns and walks to the door. Before she leaves, she looks back at both of us and says she's sorry, that she loves us both, but the words feel meaningless after everything that's been revealed. Sarah's coughing starts up again, and this time it sounds worse, deeper and more painful, like something is tearing apart inside her chest. She doubles over trying to catch her breath, and my brother jumps up to help her, even though minutes ago he found out she lied to him about so much. I watch them and realize I need to know the full truth about her condition, about how much time she actually has left. When the coughing finally stops, I ask her directly how long the doctors have given her, what the real prognosis is beyond the vague mention of experimental treatment. She wipes her mouth with shaking hands and admits that the treatment is failing, that the cancer has spread despite everything they've tried. Her oncologist told her last month that she has maybe 6 months if she's lucky, possibly less if the tumors keep growing at their current rate. My brother stares at her and asks why she didn't tell him this, why she kept hiding how sick she really is, and she says through fresh tears that she wanted him to love her as a person, not as someone who's dying. She wanted their relationship to feel normal and real for as long as she could pretend everything was okay, to have something beautiful before the end. My brother reaches for her hand despite everything that's happened, despite the betrayal and the lies and the money stolen from me, and I see in that moment that he genuinely loves her. It doesn't excuse what they did to me, but it adds this layer of complexity I wasn't expecting. This understanding that people can do terrible things for reasons that make sense to them, even when they're hurting others. I feel my anger shift slightly, not disappearing, but changing shape into something more complicated than the pure rage I felt standing outside the church. I tell them both that I'm leaving, that they need to figure out how to explain all this to the 200 guests still sitting in the church, waiting for a wedding that's never going to happen. My brother looks up at me and asks what I'm planning to do about the inheritance, about Dad's will, and the $4 million he thought he was getting. I say I need time to think about everything, to process all the information that's come out today before I make any decisions about money or legal matters. Sarah grabs my arm with surprising strength for someone so sick and begs me not to take the baby away from my brother. Says that he's been the only father figure the child has known during this whole custody battle. She says the boy calls him daddy and lights up when he walks into the room. That ripping that relationship apart would hurt an innocent kid who didn't ask to be born into this mess. I pull my arm away and tell her I'll consider what's best for my son, not what's convenient for the people who betrayed me. My brother stands up and says he knows he has no right to ask me for anything after what he's done, but he's asking anyway because he loves that little boy regardless of whose DNA he carries. I look at both of them standing there broken and desperate, and realize that the clean revenge I planned has turned into something way more complicated than I ever imagined. I walk to the door and tell them they have 30 minutes to clear out before I come back for my things, then I leave the room without looking back. The walk through the venue to the parking lot feels endless, like I'm moving through water or thick fog that slows down every step. I can hear voices from the church, guests talking and wondering what's happening, but I don't stop or try to explain anything to anyone. My hands shake so badly when I try to unlock my car that I drop the keys twice before finally getting the door open. I sit in the driver's seat for a full minute before starting the engine, just staring at the steering wheel and trying to make my breathing slow down to something normal. The revenge I spent 2 months planning. The dramatic reveal I practiced in my head over and over. It all happened exactly like I wanted, but feels nothing like I imagined it would. There's no satisfaction, no sense of justice served or wrongs made right. Just this crushing exhaustion that makes my whole body feel heavy, like someone replaced my bones with lead. I finally start the car and pull out of the parking lot, driving toward my apartment on autopilot while my brain tries to process everything that happened in that small room. The drive takes 20 minutes, but I barely remember any of it. Like I blinked and suddenly I was parking in my building's garage. My hands are still shaking when I unlock my apartment door and step inside to the silence of empty rooms. I pour myself 3 fingers of whiskey and sit on the couch still wearing my suit. The DNA results spread out on the coffee table in front of me. The document shows clear as day that I'm the biological father of a 3-year-old boy I've never met, never held, never even seen a picture of. Sarah got pregnant from our hookup years ago and never told me, gave the baby up for adoption, and then spent 3 years trying to get him back with my brother's help using my money. The weight of impossible decisions ahead presses down on me, and I take another drink, then another, but the alcohol doesn't make anything clearer or easier to understand. My phone starts buzzing with calls and texts, and within minutes it's basically exploding with messages from family members demanding to know what happened, why the wedding was called off, what's going on with everyone. I see Mom's name pop up 6 times, then cousins and aunts and uncles I haven't talked to in months, all suddenly very interested in our family drama. I turn the phone completely off and set it face down on the table, needing the silence more than I need to explain myself to people who weren't there. I sit in the quiet apartment thinking about how Sarah is dying and will be gone in 6 months, how my brother just found out his entire identity was built on a lie, how there's a 3-year-old child caught in the middle of all this dysfunction who doesn't understand any of it. The clear moral lines I thought existed when I started gathering evidence have blurred into complicated gray areas where everyone is both victim and villain depending on how you look at it. I finish my drink and pour another one, staring at those DNA results until the numbers start to blur together. The next morning, I wake up on the couch, still in my suit with a headache pounding behind my eyes and the taste of whiskey coating my mouth. I check my phone after turning it back on and find 63 missed calls and over 100 text messages, but I delete them all without reading most of them. Instead, I pull up the contact information for Jonah Reyes, the estate attorney who's been handling Dad's will, and call his office. His assistant puts me through after a brief hold, and Jonah answers sounding professional and calm like he always does. I explain the situation as clearly as I can, about the DNA tests and the results showing my brother isn't Dad's biological son, about the wedding that didn't happen, and the revelations that came out. There's a long pause on the other end, and then Jonah says he's clearly shocked by the family drama, but he'll handle everything professionally. He confirms what I already knew, that the DNA results mean I'm the sole heir to the $4 million estate since Dad's will specifically requires biological children. He asks if I plan to contest my brother's claim, or if there are any complications I foresee with the inheritance distribution. I tell him I need time to think about everything, to consider all my options before making any final decisions about the money. He says that's reasonable and asks me to come into his office within the week to sign some paperwork and discuss next steps. Before we hang up, Jonah suggests I speak with his partner Matias Reyes, who specializes in family law complications, particularly cases involving custody disputes and inheritance issues that overlap. He says Matias has handled situations like mine before, where biological paternity creates legal complications in existing custody arrangements. I schedule a meeting with Matias for the following afternoon because I know I need legal guidance on how to handle the situation with my biological son. Jonah warns me that things could get very messy very quickly if my brother decides to fight for custody or visitation rights, and that I should be prepared for a potentially long legal battle. I thank him for the advice and end the call, then sit staring at my phone trying to decide what to do next. I spend the rest of the day researching my son's situation online, digging through public records and adoption databases to piece together the timeline of what happened. The adoption records show Sarah gave him up for adoption 3 years ago, right after her cancer diagnosis, signing away her parental rights to my brother's ex, who thought she was adopting her ex-boyfriend's biological child. The custody battle that's been playing out for the past year makes more sense now, Sarah and my brother trying to get the child back together by convincing the court that the adoptive mother was unfit or that there were problems with the original adoption. The whole situation is a tangled mess of lies and legal complications that's going to take months or maybe years to sort out properly. I find a photo of my son on my brother's ex's social media page and stare at it for a long time. This little boy with my eyes and Sarah's smile playing with toy trucks in someone's backyard. He looks happy and healthy and completely unaware that his entire life is about to get turned upside down by adults who can't stop lying to each other. My phone rings from an unknown number and I almost don't answer it, but something makes me pick up on the fourth ring. My brother's voice comes through sounding completely destroyed, rough and broken like he's been crying for hours. He asks if we can talk in person without lawyers or family drama, just the two of us trying to figure out what happens next. Part of me wants to say no, to tell him we have nothing to talk about after what he did, but another part of me is curious what he could possibly say that would make any of this better. I agree to meet him tomorrow morning at a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between our apartments that neither of us has any history with. He thanks me, and his voice cracks on the words, then the line goes quiet for a moment before he hangs up. I sit holding my phone and wondering what tomorrow's conversation will bring, what my brother thinks he can say that will change anything about the situation we're all trapped in now. That night, I sleep badly and dream about a little boy with my face running through a park while I chase him, but can never catch up. I wake up around 3 in the morning with my heart pounding and lie there staring at the ceiling thinking about the fact that I'm a father to a 3-year-old who doesn't know I exist. The abstract concept of my biological son suddenly feels real and scary in a way it didn't when he was just words on a DNA test. I have no idea how to be a parent, or if I even want that job right now, but the choice isn't really mine anymore since he's already here living his life without me. I get up and make coffee even though it's still dark outside, then sit at my kitchen table looking at the photo I found online of him playing with toy trucks in someone's backyard. He has my eyes and Sarah's smile and he looks happy, which makes me wonder if showing up in his life would make things better or worse for him. The next few hours pass slowly until the sun comes up, and it's finally time to meet my brother at the coffee shop we agreed on. I arrive 10 minutes early and order a black coffee, then sit at a corner table where I can see the door. My brother walks in exactly on time, looking like he hasn't slept in days, his eyes red and his clothes wrinkled like he slept in them. He orders something at the counter and then comes over to sit across from me, his hands shaking slightly as he sets down his cup. He starts talking immediately, saying he's sorry for everything, including the affair and the money and all the lies, and he admits he fell in love with Sarah and made terrible choices because of it. His voice cracks when he says he understands if I never forgive him, but he's begging me not to take the child away from the only family he's known. I sit there listening and feeling my anger mix with something else I don't want to name, watching my brother fall apart in front of me. He explains that he's been fighting for custody because Sarah asked him to, because she wanted the baby to have a stable home before she died. He admits he thought the child was his until yesterday when I showed him the DNA results, that Sarah lied to him too about the paternity. He says he loves the boy no matter what the biology says, and he's been the one showing up for him during the whole custody battle, going to court dates and trying to prove he could be a good father. I can hear the pain in his voice when he talks about the kid, and it makes me realize he's been lied to almost as much as I have, just in different ways. My brother wipes his eyes with the back of his hand and keeps talking, telling me about all the times he's picked the boy up from daycare, or taken him to the park, or read him bedtime stories during visits, He says the kid calls him daddy and knows him as family, and he's asking me to please not rip that away from an innocent child who didn't ask for any of this mess. I take a drink of my coffee and think about how complicated everything has become, how there are no clean answers where someone doesn't get hurt. I ask my brother what he plans to do now that he knows the truth about everything, about not being our father's son, and about the inheritance and about Sarah's cancer. He looks down at his cup and says he doesn't know, that his entire sense of who he is was built on lies, and he's trying to figure out who he actually is now. He looks so broken sitting there that I feel an unwanted surge of something like sympathy, despite all my anger, and I hate that I can't just stay purely mad at him. My brother tells me he's not going to fight me for the inheritance because he has no legal claim to it, but he's begging me to let him keep some kind of relationship with the child. He says the boy knows him and trusts him, and taking that away would be cruel to a kid who's already been through so much change in his short life. We sit in silence for a while, and then my brother asks if I'm going to tell everyone about his real father, and I say, I don't know yet. He nods and finishes his coffee, then stands up to leave but stops and turns back to say one more thing. He tells me that whatever I decide about custody or the money or our relationship, he wants me to know that he really did love Sarah, and he's sorry it happened the way it did. I watch him walk out of the coffee shop and disappear down the street. Then I sit there for another 20 minutes trying to process everything he said. The next afternoon, I drive to the office building where Matthias works and take the elevator up to the 5th floor. His secretary shows me into a conference room where he's waiting with a legal pad and a calm, professional expression that makes me feel slightly less anxious. I lay out the entire situation for him starting from the beginning, including the affair and the stolen money and the DNA results and my father's will and Sarah's cancer diagnosis. He listens carefully and takes notes, asking clarifying questions every so often, but mostly just letting me talk. When I finish, he sits back in his chair and explains my legal options clearly and simply. He says I can claim full custody as the biological father since I have the DNA proof and the financial means to provide for the child. He says I can allow my brother supervised visits if I want to maintain that relationship for the kid's sake. He says I can work out a more complex arrangement with my brother's ex, who currently has custody through the adoption. He warns me that family court will look at the child's best interests over any adult problems, which means my anger at my brother won't matter much to a judge. Matthias points out that the child has been living with my brother's ex and knows my brother as a father figure, which means completely cutting my brother out could be seen as harmful to the child's stability and development. He suggests I meet the child and his current guardian before making any permanent decisions about custody arrangements or visitation rights. He says I should see how the kid interacts with different people and get a sense of what kind of environment he's currently in before I decide to disrupt everything. I realize sitting there listening to him that I've been so focused on revenge and getting back at everyone who hurt me that I haven't actually thought about what's best for my son. Matthias asks me what I want the end result to look like, and I admit I don't really know yet. He tells me to think about it seriously and come back when I have a clearer picture of what I'm trying to achieve. Then he gives me the contact information for a child psychologist who specializes in custody transitions. I leave his office feeling more confused than when I arrived, but also like I have some actual direction now instead of just anger. That evening, I call the private investigator and ask him to help me contact my brother's ex to set up a meeting. He calls me back an hour later with her phone number and a warning that she's not happy about any of this. I dial her number, and she answers on the 3rd ring, sounding suspicious and guarded. I explain who I am and what I've learned about the child's paternity, and there's a long silence on the other end of the line. She finally speaks, and she's angry, asking how many more people are going to show up claiming to be this kid's parent. I tell her I have DNA proof and I'm not trying to hurt anyone, I just want to meet my son and figure out what's best for him. She says she's not giving up custody without understanding what kind of person I am and whether I'm actually serious about being a father or just trying to cause problems. We argue for a few minutes and then she agrees to meet me at a public park the next day, where she'll bring the boy to play. She makes it very clear that she's going to be watching me closely, and if she doesn't like what she sees, she'll fight me in court with everything she has. The next morning, I drive to the park she specified and arrive 15 minutes early, parking where I can see the playground. She shows up right on time with a small boy holding her hand, and I watch them from my car for a minute before getting out. The boy runs ahead to the swings and I walk over slowly, my heart beating hard in my chest. I watch him from a distance and he's small with my eyes and Sarah's smile, wearing a blue shirt with a dinosaur on it and light-up sneakers. He's real and solid and innocent, and I feel something shift inside me seeing him play like any normal kid. His adoptive mother stands next to me watching carefully, her arms crossed and her expression protective and wary. She doesn't say anything, but I can feel her evaluating every move I make and every expression on my face. I introduce myself to the boy as a friend of his daddy's because I'm not ready to explain the truth to a 3-year-old who won't understand. He looks up at me with curiosity and says hi, then goes back to playing with his toy trucks in the sand. He's sweet and talkative, showing me his trucks and asking if I want to play with the red one because it's his favorite. I sit down in the sand next to him and take the red truck, pushing it around while he makes engine noises and explains the rules of whatever game he's playing. My brother's ex watches our interaction from a few feet away, and I can see her taking mental notes about how I talk to him and whether I seem comfortable or fake. I feel completely out of my depth playing trucks with this little boy who shares my DNA but doesn't know who I am. He asks me what my name is and I tell him, and he repeats it a few times like he's testing how it sounds. His adoptive mother calls him over after about 20 minutes and tells him it's time to go home for lunch. He runs back to me and asks if I'm coming back to play again, and I tell him yes, if that's okay with his mom. She gives me a long look and then nods slightly, and I watch them walk back to their car together. I sit in the sand for a few more minutes after they leave, staring at the toy trucks and trying to process what just happened and what it means for everything that comes next. The adoptive mother calls him over from where he's playing in the sand, and he runs back to show me one more truck before she takes his hand. She tells him to say goodbye, and he waves at me with his free hand. Then they walk toward their car together. I watch them cross the parking lot, and something inside me shifts watching this woman who's been protecting my son when I didn't even know he existed. She buckles him into his car seat and closes the door, then turns back to look at me across the distance. I walk over slowly because I can see she wants to talk without him hearing. She crosses her arms and studies my face for a long moment before speaking. She tells me she's been fighting this custody battle for 8 months now, and it's been exhausting and scary and expensive. She says she adopted him as a baby thinking his biological parents wanted nothing to do with him, then suddenly people started coming out of nowhere claiming rights. She admits the DNA results shocked her, but also made sense of why my brother was so determined to get custody. She asks me directly what I want from this situation, and I realize standing there that I have no idea how to answer that question. I tell her honestly that I didn't know about the baby until a few days ago, and I'm still trying to process that I have a son. She nods slowly and says she can see I'm not lying about that part at least. She points out that the boy has been living with her for almost 3 years, and she's the only mother he's ever known. She says she loves him like he's her own biological child, and she's not going to let anyone hurt him or use him as a weapon in adult conflicts. I tell her I understand that and I'm not trying to hurt anyone. I just found out my entire life was a lie, and I'm trying to figure out what to do. She looks at me for another long moment, and then her expression softens slightly. She tells me she can see I'm overwhelmed and confused, not malicious. She says if I'm serious about being in his life, then we need to figure out an arrangement that puts his needs first, not adult revenge or anger. I agree with that completely, and tell her I want to do what's right for him, even though I don't know what that looks like yet. She appreciates the honesty, and suggests we work together instead of fighting in court like she's been doing with my brother. She says she's willing to include me in his life if I prove I'm genuinely committed to being a father and not just trying to win some battle. She warns me, though, that if she sees me trying to use him as a weapon or hurt him emotionally, she'll fight me with everything she has. I promise her that's not what I want, and we exchange phone numbers. She tells me to call her in a few days after I've had time to think about what kind of involvement I'm ready for. I watch her drive away with my son in the back seat, and I sit down on a park bench feeling completely drained. Over the next 2 weeks, I visit my son 3 more times at different parks and playgrounds. The first visit is awkward because I don't know how to act around a 3-year-old and he's shy at first. His adoptive mother stays close watching everything, and I can feel her evaluating whether I'm good for him. I bring a toy truck similar to the one he showed me before, and his face lights up when I give it to him. We play in the sand together, and he tells me about his favorite dinosaurs and his best friend from daycare. The second visit feels more natural because he remembers me and runs over when he sees me. We play on the swings, and he wants me to push him higher and higher, laughing every time. His adoptive mother sits on a nearby bench, and I catch her smiling at us a few times. The third visit happens at an indoor play place because it's raining, and he drags me to every climbing structure and slide. He holds my hand when we walk between areas and asks me questions about everything. I realize I'm starting to care about this little person who shares my DNA, but doesn't know I'm his father. His adoptive mother tells me after that visit that she can see I'm making a real effort, and she's warming to the idea of shared custody. She says he's been asking when I'm coming back to play, and that breaks my heart and fills it at the same time. I drive home after each visit feeling confused about what I want and what's best for him. Part of me wants full custody because he's my biological son, and I have the money to provide everything. Part of me knows ripping him away from the only mother he's known would be cruel and traumatic. I spend the nights between visits staring at my ceiling trying to figure out what kind of father I want to be. My phone rings on a Tuesday afternoon, and it's a number I don't recognize. I answer and hear Sarah's voice on the other end asking if we can talk. My first instinct is to hang up, but something stops me. She sounds weak and tired and says she's at the hospital receiving treatment. I tell her I don't want to see her, and she says she understands but asks me to please consider it. She says there are things I need to know about why everything happened the way it did. I hang up without answering and call Matthias to ask his advice. He listens to the situation and suggests it might actually help with the custody arrangement to understand Sarah's full perspective. He points out that if she's dying like the investigator said, this might be my only chance to get answers. I don't want to give her anything after what she did, but I also know he's right. I call her back and agree to visit the next day. She gives me the hospital name and room number and thanks me. I spend that night preparing myself for another difficult conversation with someone who destroyed my life. I walk into the hospital the next afternoon and find her room on the 3rd floor. I stand outside the door for a minute trying to calm myself before going in. When I push the door open, I see her in the bed and she looks terrible. She's lost weight and her skin is pale and there are dark circles under her eyes. The cancer is clearly winning despite whatever treatments she's been getting. She tries to smile when she sees me, but it comes out weak and sad. I sit in the chair next to the bed and wait for her to speak first. She starts by apologizing for everything, and I can see tears forming in her eyes. She tells me she got pregnant from our hookup years before we officially started dating, and she was scared and young. She says she gave the baby up for adoption because she didn't think she could handle being a mother at that point in her life. Then right after the adoption went through, she got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. The doctors gave her maybe 2 years to live, and she started the experimental treatments that have been keeping her alive. She says she regretted giving him up almost immediately and wanted to get him back before she died. She explains that's when she reached out to my brother and started the whole custody battle. I listen to all of this, and it helps me understand the timeline, but it doesn't excuse anything. Sarah admits she manipulated my brother into helping her by making him think the child was his biological son. She says she told him they had hooked up during a period when she and I were briefly broken up, and he believed her. She says she fell in love with him for real over the past 3 years, but the relationship started as a way to get close to the baby's adoptive family. She knows it was wrong and manipulative, but she was desperate and dying and not thinking clearly. She says the experimental treatment costs were covered by my brother's family money, and she couldn't have afforded it otherwise. She admits using my money from our joint account to pay for the custody lawyers because she wanted to help my brother get the baby back for both of them. The explanation doesn't make what she did okay, but it helps me understand how the lies built on top of each other over time. She says she never meant to hurt me, but she got caught in her own web of deception. She tells me she was planning to confess everything after the wedding and try to work out some arrangement where everyone could be part of the boy's life. I ask her why she thought that would work, and she admits she didn't really think it through. She just kept making choices based on fear and desperation. I ask Sarah why she didn't just tell me the truth from the beginning when she got pregnant. She says she was ashamed and scared I would reject both her and the baby. She admits she made terrible choices driven by fear of dying alone and wanting to leave something good behind. She knows she destroyed multiple lives, including her own, and there's no way to fix it now. She asks me through tears to please let my brother be part of our son's life because he genuinely loves the boy and has been good to him during this whole mess. She says my brother didn't know the full truth about the manipulation, and he's been lied to almost as much as I have. I sit there processing this and realizing that my brother was also a victim of her desperation, even though he still chose to have an affair with my fiancé. Sarah tells me she knows I have every right to hate her and cut everyone out, but she's begging me to think about what's best for the child. She says he needs stability and love, and people who will show up for him, and my brother has been doing that even when he thought the boy was his biological son. Sarah starts coughing badly, and a nurse comes in to check on her. After the nurse leaves, Sarah tells me she stopped the experimental treatment because it's not working anymore. She says the cancer has spread, and the treatment was making her remaining time miserable without actually extending it. She has maybe 3 months left according to her doctors, and she wants to spend them saying goodbye to people she loves. She asks if I'll allow her supervised visits with our son so she can tell him goodbye in an age-appropriate way. She says she doesn't want him to grow up not knowing his birth mother cared about him. I think about denying her this because of everything she did, but it feels needlessly cruel to keep a dying mother from her child. I tell her I'll allow supervised visits if his adoptive mother agrees to it. Sarah thanks me and starts crying harder. I leave the hospital feeling emotionally exhausted and more confused than ever about what's right. The next week, I call Cordelia Beckham, the therapist Matthias recommended for processing complicated family trauma. I schedule my first session and show up not really knowing what to expect. She's professional and calm and asks me to explain the situation. I spend the first hour just laying out the entire mess from the beginning. She listens without judgment and takes notes occasionally. By the end of the session, I feel wrung out, but also slightly lighter from having said it all out loud to someone neutral. She tells me we have a lot to work through regarding the layers of betrayal and grief I'm experiencing. She says our sessions will focus on separating my anger at the adults from my responsibility to my son. She points out that I'm dealing with my father's recent death, my brother's identity crisis, my fiancé's terminal illness and sudden fatherhood all at the same time. She says it's normal to feel overwhelmed and confused. She asks me what I want the end result to look like, and I admit I still don't know. She tells me that's okay, and we'll work on figuring that out together. I schedule weekly sessions and leave feeling like maybe therapy can help me make sense of this impossible situation. In my third session with Cordelia, she helps me understand that I can acknowledge Sarah's terminal illness as tragic while still holding her accountable for the betrayal. She says both things can be true at the same time, and I don't have to choose between anger and compassion. She points out that my brother was also lied to and manipulated by Sarah, which doesn't excuse his affair with my fiancé, but adds important context. She asks me to consider what kind of relationship I want with my brother long-term, separate from the immediate hurt. She says holding on to rage and cutting him out completely might feel good now, but it won't help me or my son in the future. She encourages me to think about whether I want my son growing up knowing his uncle, or whether I want to deny that relationship because of adult conflicts. I tell her I don't know how to forgive my brother for sleeping with my fiancé, even if he was manipulated. She says forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing, it means choosing not to let the betrayal control my future decisions. She gives me exercises to work on between sessions about separating different types of anger and grief. I leave feeling like the path forward is slightly clearer, even though it's still complicated and painful. Mom's calls start coming in the next day, 5 missed calls before noon. I let them go to voicemail. She leaves messages saying we need to talk, that she can explain everything, that she's sorry. I delete them without listening to the end. By the third day, she's texting every few hours. Please answer. I made mistakes. Let me make this right. I block her number and feel nothing about it. Cordelia asks me in our next session how I'm handling my mother's attempts to reach out. I tell her I'm not handling them because I'm not engaging with them at all. She suggests that avoiding mom forever isn't sustainable and that eventually I'll need to face that relationship one way or another. She asks if I'd be willing to meet with mom in a controlled environment with her present as a mediator. I think about it for a long time before agreeing. The meeting happens a week later in Cordelia's office. Mom walks in looking smaller than I remember, her eyes red like she's been crying for days. She sits across from me, and Cordelia facilitates the conversation by establishing ground rules about listening and speaking without interruption. Mom starts by saying she knows she messed up badly, and there's no excuse for what she did. She admits she knew about Sarah and my brother's affair for 2 years and actively helped them hide it from me. She says she thought she was protecting everyone by keeping the secret, but she sees now that she was just protecting herself from having to face the consequences. She tells me she was scared of losing both her sons if the truth came out, so she chose the coward's way of pretending everything was fine. She asks for my forgiveness, but her voice breaks when she says it, and I can tell she knows how unlikely that is. I sit there listening, and feeling mostly numb to her words. I tell her I'm not ready to forgive her, and I might never be ready. I say that she chose my brother and Sarah over me repeatedly for 2 years, and that's not something I can just get over because she's sorry now. Mom starts crying harder and says she understands, but she hopes someday I'll let her try to rebuild our relationship. Cordelia helps us establish some boundaries about future contact, and Mom agrees to give me space while staying available if I decide I want to talk. The session ends, and Mom hugs me before leaving, but I don't hug her back. The next session with Mom happens 2 weeks later at my request. Cordelia sits between us again and asks Mom to tell me more about my brother's biological father. Mom takes a deep breath and starts talking about her college boyfriend named Michael. She says they dated for 3 years and were planning to get married after graduation. He died in a car accident 2 months before their wedding, and Mom found out she was pregnant 3 weeks after his funeral. She was devastated and grieving and terrified about being a single mother at 22. She met Dad at a support group for people who'd lost loved ones, and they bonded over their shared grief. They started dating quickly and got married within 6 months. Mom let Dad believe the baby was his because she was scared and alone and wanted her child to have a father. She says she told herself it was the right thing to do because Dad loved her and wanted to raise the baby as his own. She carried the secret for 40 years and watched it poison everything. She tells me that seeing her sons destroy each other over lies and betrayals is her worst nightmare coming true. She says she knows she caused this by starting the cycle of deception decades ago. I feel some sympathy for her situation, but mostly I just feel tired of all the family lies. I ask her why she didn't just tell the truth when Dad left us years ago, and she says she was too afraid of my brother hating her. She chose protecting herself over protecting her sons, and now we're all paying for it. Cordelia helps us process the information, and Mom cries through most of it. I leave feeling like I understand Mom's choices better, but that doesn't mean I forgive them. Jonah calls me 3 weeks later to say the inheritance paperwork is finalized. I need to come to his office to sign the final documents and receive the transfer of funds. I drive there the next day and sit across from him while he explains the details. $4 million from Dad's estate minus legal fees and taxes. The money will be deposited into an account in my name within 5 business days. He pushes the papers across the desk and I sign them feeling strange about the whole thing. This money represents Dad's entire life's work, and I'm the only one getting it because of biology. Jonah asks if I have any questions, and I tell him I want to set up a trust fund for my son and put aside money for Sarah's medical expenses. He says he can help me with that, and we schedule another meeting to handle those arrangements. The money hits my account 4 days later, and I stare at the balance on my phone. $4 million feels heavy with complicated emotions. Grief over Dad dying before we could fix our relationship. Guilt about my brother getting nothing even though Dad raised him. Anger at the circumstances that led to this point. I transfer a chunk of it to a separate account so I don't have to look at the full amount every time I check my balance. I call Jonah back and tell him I want to set up the trust fund immediately. He walks me through the process, and I establish an account that my son can access when he turns 18. I also put aside $50,000 for Sarah's medical expenses in her final months. It feels like the right thing to do, even though she doesn't deserve my help. I text my brother asking to meet, and he responds within minutes saying yes. We meet at the same coffee shop as before, and he looks better than last time, less broken somehow. I tell him straight out that I'm not going to completely cut him out of our son's life, but we need clear boundaries and family therapy if we're going to rebuild any kind of relationship. He nods and says he understands, and he's grateful I'm even willing to try. He tells me he's been seeing a therapist twice a week trying to process everything that happened. He says the therapy is helping him understand why he made such terrible choices and how to be a better person going forward. He admits he was jealous of me for years because I was Dad's biological son, and he felt like he never measured up. He says that doesn't excuse sleeping with my fiance, but it explains some of why he was vulnerable to Sarah's manipulation. I listen and try to separate my anger at his actions from understanding his perspective. He asks if I'll consider giving him some of the inheritance since Dad raised him as a son for 35 years. I tell him I'll think about it, but I'm not making any promises. He says that's fair, and he appreciates me even considering it. We talk for another hour about logistics for seeing our son and what boundaries we need to establish. He agrees to family therapy sessions and asks when we can start. I tell him I'll set something up through Cordelia's office. My brother calls me a few days later, sounding upset. He tells me he ended things with Sarah because he can't marry someone who lied to him about so much. He says he still loves her, but he can't build a future on that foundation of deception. He's staying in her life as a friend during her final months because he doesn't want to abandon her when she's dying. I understand his position, even though part of me thinks he should stick by her since he was complicit in betraying me. He asks if I think he's doing the right thing, and I tell him I don't know what the right thing is anymore. He sounds lost and sad, and I feel bad for him despite everything. He says Sarah took the breakup hard, but she understood his reasons. She told him she never expected him to stay with her once the truth came out. They're going to try to maintain a friendship for whatever time she has left. I tell him that seems like the best option given the circumstances. We hang up, and I sit there thinking about how nobody in this situation gets a happy ending. I meet with Matthias 3 times over the next month to work out a formal custody arrangement. The legal process is complicated because my son's adoptive mother has legal custody, I'm the biological father who wants visitation rights, and my brother wants to maintain his relationship with the child. Matthias drafts an agreement where the adoptive mother retains primary custody since she's been raising him, and that's most stable for the boy. I get regular visitation rights as the biological father, with the arrangement increasing over time as my son gets older and more comfortable with me. My brother gets limited supervised visits since he has no legal claim, but has been present in the child's life during the custody battle. It's messy and complicated, but it prioritizes my son's stability while allowing him to maintain relationships with the adults he knows. The adoptive mother agrees to the arrangement after meeting with her own lawyer. Matthias says we'll need to file the paperwork with family court and get a judge's approval, but he thinks it will go through without problems. The arrangement will be reevaluated when my son is older and can express his own preferences about custody and visitation. I sign the papers feeling like this is the best possible outcome given how messed up everything is. Sarah's health declines rapidly over the next 6 weeks. The experimental treatment stops working and the cancer spreads to her lungs and liver. She's moved to hospice care at a facility near her apartment. I get a call from my brother saying Sarah wants to see our son one more time before she dies. I talk to the adoptive mother, and we agree to bring him for a visit. We drive to the hospice together with my son chattering in the back seat about his day at preschool. He doesn't understand where we're going or why. We walk into Sarah's room and she's lying in bed looking thin and pale and barely recognizable. She smiles when she sees my son and asks him to come closer. He climbs up on the bed carefully and she hugs him gently. She tells him she's his birth mommy who loves him very much, but she's very sick. My son asks if she's going to get better and she says no, she's going to go to heaven soon. He doesn't fully understand, but he seems to sense something important is happening. He shows her his drawings from the school, and she looks at each one carefully and tells him they're beautiful. She asks him to be a good boy and listen to his mommy and the other grown-ups who love him. He nods seriously and hugs her again. I watch from the doorway, feeling my throat get tight. It's awful watching someone die, but I'm glad Sarah gets these final moments with her son. The visit lasts 20 minutes before Sarah gets too tired to stay awake. We leave, and my son asks in the car why the lady was so sick. His adoptive mother tells him gently that sometimes people get very sick, and their bodies stop working. He accepts this explanation and goes back to talking about his toys. My brother and I start family therapy sessions together the following week. We meet with a therapist who specializes in family conflict and betrayal. The first session is hard and angry. My brother tries to explain his actions, and I tell him there's no explanation that makes it okay. The therapist helps us establish ground rules about communication and respect. She says we need to separate our adult conflicts from our shared responsibility to the child. Over the next few sessions, we slowly work through the layers of betrayal and hurt. My brother admits he was selfish and made terrible choices. I admit I've been holding on to anger that's not helping anyone. We backslide sometimes into yelling and accusations, but we keep showing up because we're both committed to finding a way forward for our son's sake. The therapist gives us exercises to do between sessions about empathy and perspective taking. It's painful work and progress is slow, but I can feel something shifting between us. We're not going to have the relationship we had before, but maybe we can build something new based on honesty instead of lies. I think about the inheritance for weeks before making a decision. $4 million is more money than I need, and my brother has nothing because of biology he couldn't control. I talk to Cordelia about it in therapy, and she asks me what feels right regardless of legal obligation. I realize I want to give him some of the money not because I have to, but because Dad raised him as a son for 35 years. That relationship was real, even if the biology wasn't. I call my brother and tell him I'm giving him $500,000 from the inheritance. He's quiet for a long time before asking if I'm serious. I tell him I am, and that it's not about legal obligation, but about acknowledging that Dad was his father in all the ways that matter. My brother starts crying on the phone and says he doesn't know what to say. He tells me he'll use the money to get his life stable and be a better person. He says this feels like a second chance he doesn't deserve, but he's going to try to earn it. I tell him I'm not doing this to make him feel better. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. The money can't fix everything that's broken between us, but it feels like a step towards something better. I transfer the funds the next day, and my brother sends me a long text thanking me and promising to make good choices going forward. Sarah dies 3 weeks later on a Tuesday morning. My brother calls me from the hospice saying she passed away peacefully in her sleep. He asks if I'll come say goodbye, and I drive over even though I'm not sure why. I walk into her room and she looks small and still in the bed. My brother is sitting next to her holding her hand and crying quietly. I stand there looking at her and feeling sad for the wasted potential and the tragedy of her short life. She was only 29 years old. She made terrible choices, but she also faced impossible circumstances with a terminal diagnosis. My brother tells me she asked for both of us to be here at the end. She wanted us to know she was sorry for everything, and she hoped we could find a way to move forward. I sit down next to my brother, and we stay there for a while in silence. It feels strange, but also like the beginning of healing. Two brothers sitting with the woman who destroyed and connected them. My brother says we should tell our son about her when he's old enough to understand who she was and why she made the choices she did. I agree, and we leave the hospice together. The funeral happens 4 days later, and it's small. Just me, my brother, Mom, and a few of Sarah's friends. We bury her next to her parents, and my brother puts flowers on her grave. I stand there thinking about how none of us get the endings we want, and sometimes the best we can do is survive the mess we're given. 3 months pass, and I settle into a pattern with my son. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, I pick him up from his adoptive mom's house, and we spend 3 hours together at the park or the library, or sometimes just playing with trucks on my apartment floor. He calls me by my first name now instead of Mr., and last week he asked if I could come to his preschool show and tell. His adoptive mother texts me photos during the week of him doing normal kid things like finger painting or eating spaghetti with his hands. We talk on the phone once a week about his schedule and what foods he's liking and whether he needs new shoes. It's not the instant father-son bond I imagined, but it's real and growing. He hugs me goodbye now without being prompted, and sometimes he asks when I'm coming back before I've even left. His adoptive mother tells me he talks about me to his stuffed animals at bedtime. We're building something slow and careful, both of us aware that we're learning as we go. My brother calls me one evening to tell me he got a job managing inventory at a medical supply company. It's not glamorous, but it's steady work with benefits, and he sounds genuinely proud when he describes his first week. We start having dinner together once a month at a diner halfway between our apartments. The first few dinners are awkward with long silences and careful conversation about weather and sports. But slowly we find our way to harder topics. He tells me about his therapy sessions and how he's working through his identity crisis about not being Dad's biological son. I tell him about the challenges of trying to be a present father to a kid who already has a mom. We talk about our son and make decisions together about his care. My brother asks if he can take him to the zoo sometime, and I agree as long as his adoptive mother is comfortable with it. It's not the easy brotherly friendship we had before, where we could finish each other's sentences and share inside jokes, but it feels more honest. We're building something new on a foundation of truth instead of comfortable lies. Sometimes I still feel angry when I look at him across the table, but the anger is quieter now, more manageable. Mom reaches out through Cordelia, asking if I'll meet with her in a supervised session. I agree mainly because Cordelia thinks it might help me process my feelings about the whole family mess. We sit in Cordelia's office with Mom on one side of the room and me on the other while Cordelia mediates. Mom cries and apologizes and says she knows she failed me by choosing to protect my brother and Sarah instead of being honest. She admits she was scared of losing both her sons if the truth came out. She talks about carrying the secret of my brother's paternity for 40 years and how it poisoned everything. I tell her I'm not ready to forgive her, and I might never be. Cordelia helps us establish some basic ground rules about communication and honesty going forward. Mom asks if she can be part of her grandson's life, and I tell her she can have supervised visits if his adoptive mother agrees. We schedule another session for next month. It's not reconciliation, but it's a start towards something that might eventually look like a relationship. I meet with Jonah to discuss what to do with the inheritance money. After paying off my debts and buying a modest condo, I still have over $3 million sitting in an account. I decide to set up a college fund for my son that will cover his education through graduate school if he wants it. Then I tell Jonah I want to establish a foundation in Sarah's name to help young mothers facing terminal illness. Jonah connects me with a nonprofit lawyer who helps me structure it properly. My brother offers to help run the foundation as a volunteer, which surprises me. We work together on the mission statement and application process. It feels like a way to honor the complicated truth of who Sarah was without pretending her choices were okay. She made terrible decisions, but she also faced impossible circumstances. The foundation can't fix what happened, but maybe it can help other women in similar situations make better choices. My brother and I spend hours on the phone discussing how to screen applicants and what kind of support to offer. It gives us something constructive to work on together. My son's 4th birthday party happens on a sunny Saturday in May. His adoptive mother decorates her backyard with superhero banners and rents a bouncy castle. I show up early to help set up tables and chairs. My brother arrives with a carefully wrapped present. Mom comes with cookies she baked herself. We're all awkward around each other at first, making small talk about the weather and the decorations. But when my son runs out in his birthday shirt and sees all of us together, his face lights up. He doesn't understand the complicated adult dynamics, but he knows he's loved by multiple people who are trying their best. We sing happy birthday, and he blows out the candles on his superhero cake. I watch him play with his friends in the bouncy castle, while his adoptive mother chats with me about kindergarten registration. My brother helps serve cake and Mom takes photos on her phone. It's messy and imperfect, but everyone makes an effort for his sake. For 2 hours, we're just adults celebrating a kid's birthday, instead of a fractured family drowning in betrayal and secrets. I start seeing Cordelia individually again to work through my fears about dating. She helps me understand how I missed red flags with Sarah and why I was so willing to ignore warning signs. We talk about my tendency to trust too easily and my fear of being alone. After 3 months of therapy work, I download a dating app and start swiping cautiously. I'm upfront in my profile about having a complicated family situation and a young son. Most women swipe left, which is fine. I go on a few coffee dates that don't lead anywhere. Then I match with a teacher named Amy, who asks good questions and seems genuinely interested in my life. We have dinner and I tell her the broad strokes of what happened without dumping all the trauma on her. She listens and doesn't run away. We go on a second date and a third. I'm taking it slow and trying to be vulnerable while also protecting myself. Cordelia reminds me that healthy relationships are built over time through consistent honesty and mutual respect. I'm learning to trust my instincts again. My brother texts me asking if he can bring someone to our next monthly dinner. He's been seeing a woman he met through his therapy group, and he wants me to meet her. I agree and show up at the diner nervous about how this will go. Her name is Lisa, and she works as a nurse. My brother introduces us and explains that she knows everything about our family situation. Lisa is warm and genuine, asking me questions about my son and my work without being nosy. I can see my brother is different with her, more relaxed and honest than I ever saw him with Sarah. We have a surprisingly pleasant dinner talking about normal things like movies and weekend plans. Lisa mentions she has a daughter from a previous marriage and talks about the challenges of co-parenting. My brother holds her hand across the table, and I can see he's trying to build something healthy this time. When they leave, Lisa hugs me goodbye and says she hopes we can all get together again soon. Driving home, I realize I'm genuinely happy for my brother, which feels strange after everything that happened. A year after the wedding that never was, I'm at the park watching my son climb on the jungle gym. My brother and Lisa are sitting on the bench next to me, while his adoptive mother stands near the slides, ready to catch him if he falls. My son waves at all of us from the top of the structure, looking proud of himself. His adoptive mother and I talk about kindergarten options and whether we should sign him up for soccer. My brother mentions that Lisa's daughter might be in the same class. We're all learning to work together for my son's sake. Life is complicated and messy. I'm a father who's still figuring out how to parent a kid I didn't know existed 2 years ago. I'm a brother slowly rebuilding trust with someone who betrayed me in the worst way. I'm a son working through decades of family lies and weekly therapy sessions. The revenge I planned so carefully gave me no satisfaction when it actually happened. But this messy work of forgiveness and co-parenting is giving me something better. I have a real relationship with my child built on honesty instead of secrets. I have a family that admits its flaws instead of hiding behind comfortable lies. I'll never get back what I lost with Sarah, or have the simple brotherhood I once had. But I'm building something new that might actually last because it's based on truth.